Miss Cutforth, do you love your husband?
I despise him.
Indeed. And you always did, didn't you? Even before you married him.
No, but I would have done if I knew what he was capable of.
But you didn't love him when you married him, did you?
I believed I did.
And you despised his friends and everything he stood for except his money.
That's not true.
Well, let's see now. During the years you lived together, how many friends visited Elm Court?
I've no idea. Hundreds.
Your friends?
Certainly.
How many of those were your husbands?
Well, there were streams of business contacts, of course.
I mean friends, Miss Cutforth.
5 or 6, perhaps.
So few out of those hundreds?
They felt out of place. They knew it.
He had 3 special friends, didn't he, from his childhood? Alfie and Clive Jones and Sid Barnett, whom he'd made directors of some of his companies. They only went to Elm Court once during your marriage because you told your husband you didn't want to see them there again, didn't you?
No, they felt out of place. I invited them, but they didn't come.
Your husband wanted children, didn't he?
We both did.
Yet you had none. You say you wanted them too?
Yes.
I have to suggest to you, Miss Cutforth, that you constantly stated you didn't want children and took unilateral precautions not to have them.
That's not true. I told you I wanted children.
Very well. I can't take that any further. When did you first meet your husband?
About the end of 1966.
Could it have been as early as September?
Yes, I think it was.
Now, Miss Cutforth, I want to deal with the financial aspect of your marriage. Your father, Sir Peter Cutforth, manages the family business, doesn't he? Cutforth's, the private bank. And at about the end of 1966, the bank got into difficulties, didn't it?
I wouldn't know about that.
Oh, yes, you would, because it was you who saved the family bank, wasn't it? By doing a deal with Mr. Scard that if he loaned your father enough money to tide him over, you would marry him?
That is a monstrous suggestion.
You deny it?
Every word, it's a lie.
And a special feature of the deal was that your father was not to know anything about it, wasn't it?
It's all nonsense.
So you arranged that if Mr. Scard loaned half the money, you would announce the engagement 6 months later, and after that, if he loaned the rest of the money, you would then marry him.
He told you all that. He's an animal.
You deny it?
Emphatically.
After your stay at Elm Court, you went to the police, didn't you?
Yes.
And made a complaint to them, but they would have nothing to do with it, would they?
They said it was a private matter.
So you chose to bring a prosecution of your own. This is a private prosecution, isn't it? Brought and paid for by you?
Yes, it is.
Why didn't you bring a civil action for assault and imprisonment and claim damages?
I'm not interested in money.
Oh? I thought you were. So you're bringing a private prosecution so as to hurt Robert Scard as badly as you can.
What he did was criminal, that's why.
You've told us you went to Elm Court because you wanted more money.
Yes, more maintenance. I've already told you that.
But it wasn't expressed like that, was it? Your husband suggested a reconciliation, and you played along because you wanted more money.
He knew there could be no possibility of a reconciliation ever.
But one of your terms for this fresh start was not that you should just be financially independent, but an enormously rich woman in your own right. And when you couldn't get your own way, you threatened to bring a charge of rape against him and to get him off the boards of all his companies.
That's the first I've heard of.
And that's just what you're doing, isn't it? Carrying out your threat.
I have no re-examination, my lord.
Very well. Thank you, Miss Cutforth.
I call Sir Peter Cutforth. You are the father of Miss Cutforth, the complainant?
Yes.
Did you see your daughter in October of last year?
Yes, several times, but I expect you want to know about October the 7th.
Yes.
I was woken up a little before 1 in the morning by the doorbell. I found Serena outside. She asked if she could stay the night. She looked exhausted and extremely upset about something.
You noticed her appearance?
Well, what caught my attention was that she had no makeup on.
Now, will you just answer this question, yes or no? Did she say if anything was the matter?
I asked, and at first she wouldn't say a word. However, when I'd cooked her something to eat, made up a bed for her, it all came out.
So she did say what was the matter?
Yes.
It was a complaint against someone?
Yes.
What sort of state was she in when she told you this?
She was crying. Next day, at my insistence, we went round to the local police station to make a complaint. But for some reason best known to them, they advised her to take up the matter with her solicitors.
Have you seen your daughter upset before? I mean, in the way in which she was upset that night?
Of course, when she was a little girl, but not since she's grown up. She's really a very self-possessed young woman.
Yes, thank you.
Well, we might as well have it out in the open. What did your daughter tell you that night?
She said that Robert had kept her locked up and had taken her against her will.
Now, Sir Peter, you have worked in the city for many years?
That's correct, yes.
And it's right, isn't it, that Mr. Scard enjoys the highest reputation in the city, both for his ability and his integrity?
Oh, yes, indeed. He's not one of the new pack of compulsive asset strippers.
Right, and it's right also that you have done business with Mr. Scard.
Cutforth's Bank, you mean? Yes.
Would you like to tell the court about it?
It was towards the end of 1966. The bank had a slight liquidity problem. We needed a bridging loan.
Your slight liquidity problem, a shortage of hard cash.
Yes.
How much was the loan you wanted?
£5 million. We had ample security for it.
And that was when you approached Robert Scard.
As a matter of fact, we approached a number of people, but we approached the Bow Investment Trust, that's Mr. Scard's, about the beginning of December, 66. First, he wasn't interested. But in January 67, he came back, and the loan was agreed. In two parts, £2 million to be paid in February and a further £3 million the following September. I may add that we've all done very well out of this piece of mutual cooperation.
Yes. Now, one of the terms for this agreement was that Mr. Scard could nominate a director to the board of Cutforth's Bank, and he did that, didn't he?
Yes.
And that director is still with you as Mr. Scard's nominee?
Yes, Alfie Jones.
Now, you first met Mr. Scard at the end of 1966.
Yes. Well, that's right. I hadn't met him before.
But your daughter announced her engagement in July 1967. Did that come as a surprise to you?
Yes, it did.
Why was that now?
Well, for one thing, she'd been more or less unofficially engaged to another chap for some time, and so far as I knew, that was still going on. And I didn't know that she even knew Robert.
I suppose you asked her when she met him.
Yes, I gathered that they met in July of 67 at a house party at Hydra in Greece.
A swift engagement, then?
Yes, but not a shotgun marriage.
No, of course not. No children at all. I suppose you saw a lot of Mr. Scard after the engagement?
Well, of course. I came to respect him as much as she did.
She respected him?
Oh, yes. He was, after all, 15 years her senior.
Do you think he loved her?
Oh, I don't think anybody could doubt that. He was absolutely mad about her. He'd have done anything for her.
And did you have a close relationship with your daughter?
Yes, we were always extremely close. Ever since her mother died when Serena was 7. I would do anything for her.
And she for you?
Yes, I believe so.
Thank you, Sir Peter.
Sir Peter, I want you to take your time and answer this question carefully. Is there any truth whatsoever in the suggestion that your daughter agreed to marry Mr. Scard as a condition for the bridging loan of £5 million,
Mr.
do you?
Harvesty, I don't
understand. Look, how could anybody suggest such a
Oh, it
thing?
isn't I, but the defence who've been suggesting it throughout
But it's
your
impossible.
cross-examination.
Why, she hadn't even met him until after the loan was agreed.
Her evidence is that she had.
But my
Now,
lord,
don't worry, Peter. Mr. Harvesty, it has never been suggested that this witness was a party to the supposed deal, or that he even knew about it, so you cannot ask him about it.
Very well, my lord. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Sir Peter. You may go.
I call Harold Arthur Beamish. You are Mr. Scard's butler and have been, I believe, for 8 years.
Yes, sir.
You are still employed by Mr. Scard?
Yes, my lord.
Do you come here of your own free will?
I have been subpoenaed, my lord.
Were you at Elm Court on the 5th, 6th and 7th of October of last year?
Yes, sir, I was.
Tell the court, please, what happened.
Mr. Scard came home rather late, about 2:30 in the morning. I had waited up for him in case he should want anything. Madam was with him, sir.
Did that surprise you?
Yes. They had been separated for almost a year, sir.
Then what happened?
Then we all retired to our respective beds. The next morning I saw Mr. Scard. He said that Madame was very tired and would be resting for a couple of days. He said that he would take her meals and that none of the servants was to go near her rooms.
Were you surprised by that?
Yes. Mr. Scard never gave orders at Elm Court.
Orders? Who ran the household, fixed the time of meals and so on?
Madam did, my lord.
Yes, but she wasn't there for the first 4 years of your service, nor the last year. When she wasn't there, who ran the house?
I did, my lord.
Did you see Mr. Scard take up food to his wife's rooms?
Yes, sir.
Did he also take up food for himself?
No, sir, I served him in his study downstairs.
When did you next see Mrs. Scard?
On the 7th, sir, at about 9 p.m. I was on the landing, just passing Madame's rooms, when quite suddenly she burst out of the door.
Did you notice anything about her appearance?
Oh, yes, sir. She was breathing heavily and seemed very frightened. Her nightdress was torn and there was blood about her mouth.
Did she say anything?
Not at once. Mr. Scard came out the door after her, shouting.
Shouting? What?
He was swearing at her, sir. He said, "A gangbang would be too good for you." Madame said, "He's mad." I then suggested that Madame should go to my room, and then I borrowed some clothes for her from one of the maids.
Why did you suggest that she should go to your room? To protect her from Mr. Scard?
Oh, no, sir. Mr. Scard did not offer her any violence in my presence. But Madame's nightdress was of a rather revealing nature. It did not conceal as much as some nightdresses do. Might have...
You mean it was transparent?
Yes, my lord. And also, when Madame asked if she might go back into her rooms to collect her clothes, Mr. Scard replied, "No, you effing cannot." Then he went back into her rooms, locking Madame out, sir.
Did you subsequently do some detective work?
Yes, sir. The day after Madame left, I went into her rooms. I found that the windows had been screwed up and that the bell was not working. Oh, and I also found that the wire had been cut under the carpet.
Do you know when the windows had been screwed up?
No, sir. The last occasion I had to open the windows, which would be some 3 months before, there were no screws then. In fact, the windows opened very easily.
I see. Thank you.
I have no cross-examination, my lord.
That is the case for the prosecution, my lord.
My lord, I have a submission to make.
Yes, Mr. Cross. What is it?
My lord, my submission is that in law, a husband cannot be charged with the imprisonment or the rape of his wife, that is, where they are not legally separated. Therefore, I submit there is no case to answer, my lord.
The case of the Queen against Scard will be resumed tomorrow in the Crown Court.